Okay, we are ready.
Great. Welcome to the November 6th, 2023 meeting of the Transportation Committee of Manhattan Community Board 6. I am Brian Van Nieuwenhoven, and I am chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at Zoom being full screen and not telling me what time it is.
7:06.
Thank you. 7:06 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law now requires all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any question that you have by raising your hand. There's time following the committee's discussion on an agenda item. We will field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. Who has the ability or is available to take minutes among those present? We have a volunteer. Gabe, you're volunteering. What should we get? You need a pen and paper or anything?
Oh, I do it off YouTube.
Oh, you're gonna do it off YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, we started at 7:06 p.m. But okay. We'll now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name. When I call your name, please say present, and I will announce if there is quorum. Majed Abdul Samad is not here tonight. Mike Devereaux, I also
He is excused.
don't see, he is excused. Pete Desmond,
Present.
Brock Friedman,
Present.
Jason Cromowitz,
Present.
Matt Roberts,
Present.
Larry Shire,
Present.
Gabe Terzo,
Present.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
Present.
Jerry Weinstein,
Present.
and Haider Zaidi.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office, and a new agenda will be reflected on the screen in front of you. We have reordered the items that we have had that were on the agenda. It was ordered arbitrarily before. This is for us to move some of the non-voting items ahead on the agenda. I believe we have everybody here who we expect to participate. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as displayed on the live stream and on the screen in front of you. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the October 2nd meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting those minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the October 2nd meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CP6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. 1, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2, committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Number 3, committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so that you can speak. Number 4, all committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. Number 5, the chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Now we will move into committee business. As per tonight's agenda, our first item of discussion was revisiting of the NYC Summer Streets expansion. This was an item for which we have already passed a resolution, and it was on our resolution tracker. Brendan, do you want to bring up that resolution for us to review?
Yes, just give me a second, making sure that I share the resolution for our viewers at home as well. This is the resolution. It passed at our March 2021 full board meeting. And I'll scroll just straight to the resolve clauses, since that's what's important. And there are other resolve clauses, which I can scroll to.
So at a very basic level, we saw an opportunity to make summer streets better for our district. And we advanced these resolutions to we advanced this information as a board, as a recommendation to the Department of Transportation. So a couple of nuances about this is, one, they have not made any of these expansions in our district. They have made it a bigger expansion based on advocacy that was citywide to make the entire course longer and to do other courses through the rest of the city. That is not opposed by us at all, but we did not even get a response really on this information. So there is that. What was the other? There was something else that had come to mind. We have not actually done anything in regards to the district needs statement or our budget priorities in order to make a request for funding in case funding is the reason why this cannot come to fruition. But we don't have any feedback from the Department of Transportation on this as to how we would have to structure that. And if we wanted to put that in our budget request, we can do so, and it would go into next year's process. The ordering that we vote on next October, which means that we would kind of lose this a whole coming year when they do it over the summer. So I wanted to put that out there. Is Colleen on the line and available?
Let me check. Just a moment. I unfortunately don't see Colleen here tonight. Unfortunately.
So members of the committee, do you have feedback on what we're discussing? Any ideas for the board proceed from a leadership perspective, or any additional policy or anything of that nature? If we wanted to do something, I'm not prepared with a resolution tonight. We could vote on something really quickly, but it would be probably a big surprise for the full board on Wednesday to do something new. So I would recommend anything with any nuance to form it over the course of next month, adopted in December, bring to full board December.
I think
Larry.
I think the key point here is that the community board has not received any kind of feedback whatsoever. And I think it might be best to wait for that feedback before deciding whether to put it in the budget request.
So we can do that. Go ahead.
So when I did the choral leadership course, 20 through 21, yes, one of the capstones was on summer streets, and their focus was on equity. How, of course, there are affluent areas, your park slopes, and less affluent areas, and how does that impact your ability to have summer streets? So I can, in the interval between meetings, I can reach out to that team and see who they made and supported. Connections. What the capstone was an entire day exploring 360 of the subject, so I could see what they know.
Yes, let's do that. Just to note that I put this on the agenda so that we would start to discuss it. I don't mind that if this is a multi-month process. The other thing I would add is that the spirit of this when it first passed was that, this is all very temporary. This is a festival that happens on a weekend. And they're already doing stuff like closing the FDR Drive for what's the MS ride or some of these other events. even, you know, not in our district, but, like New York's Five Borough Bike Tour, using the FDR Drive on the Upper East Side. And it's like a near full day closure, with no traffic, and the bikes choose the drive. So these are things that
New York City Half Marathon.
New York City Half Marathon uses the FDR Drive as well. So we know that there's procedure and practice of closing the drive for recreational events. And the committee at the time was and the full board was very receptive to such an expansion. It would be seen as a great way to enhance the use of public space and get more people out on those days. And just from my own understanding of Summer Streets is that one of the most recent complaints about it is crowding. It gets very, very packed because there are only the 3 weekends in Manhattan. There's a very big audience for it. And it's only until, not just to say just to 1 o'clock, but it's really only until 12:30 because they start making moves to reopen the course with a little bit of advance time. So. Jason?
I have a comment / thought. So the expansion north was phenomenal this summer. I only made it 1 of the 3 weekends, but it was amazing, frankly. And also not very busy, which was also lovely. I think that was a huge step forward in this program. I don't not opposed to this at all, but I see the bigger issue is the days, the limited amount of hours and the limited amount of days of the program rather than need of additional streets being closed off. So that would be my personal preference for advancing this would be perhaps not so much given the expansion north, which I think is a significant accomplishment. Pushing more for expansion of the time rather than additional streets. Although I suppose the problem there is that's less within the confines of our district and more like a citywide policy we'd be proposing.
Yeah, so we can perhaps organize that. Larry?
I think the budgetary constraint would come in there because you'd need personnel to work longer hours. My way of addressing this is that Jason, Jerry, are going to be a quick working group on this to organize the issues, enhance this, figure out what our strategies might be to follow up, and we'll read it back on the committee next month.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Q&A tracker. I don't see any questions about this particular agenda item. Does anyone who is on Zoom with the committee want to say something? Raise your hand. Let me see participants, panelists. I'm not seeing any additional comments. I believe I'm going to move the agenda to the next item. And that would be the next discussion item that was the revisitation. Agenda item 2 will be revisiting CB6's April 2020 resolution funding for NYC DOT research on secure bicycle parking. I think in short, this is another thing where I just wanted to call attention that we don't actually have something on the district need statement for this. We're not requesting actual funding. The original source resolution as presented was DOT, please conduct research about this. So one thing that I will do, and I think that this is more of a pressing thing on this particular item than on the last item, was that we need to figure out when we need a city agency to research something, exactly how we get to start to finish on that. Like what resources are needed, what should be our expectations? What is the line there? Where can these things just not fall through the cracks if there's something not done, or if it's not really included in like this year's budget priorities? DOT is a very, very big agency, and even us just asking for the research for something so that we can evaluate a pilot or do something like that, research information, that stuff should be present. Additionally, we believe this is a topic that DOT has researched internally, and they should be forthcoming and sharing the information on that. I can discuss with our district manager about strategy to uncover that information if it exists. And I will turn it over to the committee. Does anyone from the committee have any additional points on this particular resolution? Any new policy, any revision of policy? Alright.
It seems that DOT's, the way they do bike parking, it's never secure. It's always, bikes are getting stolen nonstop in New York City, and it's professional crime ring. It's not amateurs. So the only one I know of is Unipod that is partnering. So it might just be worth it to just invite them to tour our neighborhood and see where they think an Unipod station would go well in our neighborhood.
We can handle that offline, but I think that would be an interesting community event, and I can talk about what the possibilities are for that.
Did they propose that though, or would we ask them?
We can approach them.
No, I mean in terms of like location wise, like who should request the locations?
Column A and little B, right? I mean, they're presumably already looking, they're actively expanding everywhere they can.
Yeah, so my understanding of the situation. And I'll try to not to bring up anything that I probably shouldn't bring up or, unverifiable information, but Unipod does have partners for the spaces that they go into, and none of them are NYC DOT at this point. So they are not actually working with our Department of Transportation. They're working with the Port Authority. They're working with other public space agencies. And I believe that there's a reason for that, and that in addition to all of this, we're not in a position at the moment to create policy that selects a vendor rather than actually tries to put something like this out for bid. But that could change given the scoping of a request. If we are actually requesting a pilot, or we are an organization that is sponsoring a pilot, which I don't think we want to do, it's not the business that we're in, but we might in that position, in that situation, request funding. If there is a bid out there that controls some space and has a willing private space partner, let's say the movie theater on 2nd Avenue in the 30s, and they want it on their property, it's a property that they control, and they want to work with Uni on installation, and they come to us with a community group and say, we want funding, and can you put it in your budget priorities to get a grant for this? That's something we can talk about. Larry?
It occurred to me that Uni could help POPs activate spaces that are currently inactive. And for whatever reason, the people who are managing the POP doesn't want to expend money, but this is a way of bringing people there, and it might be useful.
Yeah, I've taken that as a note, and we can look into that.
That's great. Because usually they can be small enough that you can't do anything with them. So even having a half dozen bikes or something is a way to use the space.
And we'll see, because we have to also look into issues like access or whatnot. POPs usually have hours and stuff, so if it's an enclosed POPs and it's a gate, it may not fly, but if it's.
I'll give you
there might be something that can be.
I'll give you an example. We discussed a revision of the corner of 34th Street and 1st Avenue, where there are people who are sitting on some benches, but there's a large amount of area that doesn't actually get any people in it, and it might be useful or welcomed by the owner of that property. Maybe not, but that's the sort of thing I had in mind that could possibly fit in an existing space without modification.
And another possibility with this, EDC. If they control the land, and if we or any other vendor is talking to DOT and DOT doesn't have it in their priorities, maybe a different agency has that kind of interest in it.
Well, how about when Solar One is rebuilt?
Same thing.
That's EDC.
Matt?
No, I mean, I think, given the lack of response to the initial resolution and the overall need for security, I do really think we should be steering more towards the private sector for solutions here. I just don't see, even if the infrastructure was facilitated by DOT or some other agency, I just don't see, I mean, you'd have to have, you need insurance, you need, protections against theft and damage to this infrastructure. So I feel like that's something that would be better accomplished by the private sector in general.
And that's where we're looking at something where it would be a model of the DOT or DOT, if they were managing the space, they can offer a concession, they can take bids. A company like Uni, they do this fully integrated top to bottom, and it's a subscription service, and it works like City Bike.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe it's free
Is Uni free and not charging anybody
currently.
currently? And I mean, like, that's kind of almost a loss leading model, and they have display advertising on it, but it's also possible for a vendor to come in with a pay for bike parking plan. And
I think they're trying to currently manage properties, spaces on offer like being as a vendor for like a property over on their like bike room, I think is one of the things they're doing. But the pods, my understanding, their revenue model comes from the ads.
Yeah. And like one of the things that I had thought of when I was involved in drafting this, and one of the things I thought of when this came up was that there's always a lot of focus on it has to be secure. And even since this has been drafted, bike security is in a completely different spot. Like people can carry around power tools now that can just cut through an entire frame and locks and everything in seconds. All this stuff's really powerful now. So bike hoops just don't work anymore. What I was thinking of is everybody's so worried about the hardening and about like enclosures and whatnot. And I just thought the simplest model of this is just sort of more of a legal principle where you have a fenced area, a gate pass that you can do with a card or the NFC phone. And you have a security camera mounted to oversee the space, just the space where the bikes are parked. And the idea is, yes, someone can go in physically, vault over the fence, vandalize, steal, do things. But the idea too is that anybody who would do such a thing, anybody who would not use the gate door, anybody who would try to sneak in and start doing things, it would be recorded. And there could be legal penalties for that. That are not, it's not just somebody can just pretend, oh, I was walking down the street, I just happen to have all these tools and, I just have to be standing next to this bike rack. But if you're inside this gated area, there can be some real, repercussions, like along the lines of like, very serious charges. I don't know exactly how that all fits together, but that one of the things about a solution like that is very little infrastructure needs to be built. It can be built like the City Bike stuff where it is just a solar panel pole and a minimum of electronics and a fenced area. And it can be put anywhere in the city, and you don't have to do special ground prep. You don't need Con Ed involved, you don't need that stuff. I think Uni tries to do standalone stuff, so they're also competitive in what I'm talking about, and they provide all the hardware. As a matter of fact, Uni's been doing some really innovative stuff with creating bike battery charging cabinets that essentially solve the problem of that thermal runaway stuff that has bedeviled people charging their apartments.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good direction for that whole industry to move in. But in this particular case, it's the kind of innovation and positive thinking that we need to solve a real problem, and is a much better approach than talks about banning everything before we truly understand the problem and do real research on it. We have talked about how there was an incident in our district with an e-bike being charged and creating an apartment fire. It was a whole oversight. And that's a shortcoming in reporting, that a lot of this stuff has like a checkbox on the reports. So this is why I think that's the sort of thing you want to look into, that there are solutions to this, that you can do safe charging. We needed to like sift through some of this data and make sure that e-bikes aren't getting blamed for electrical circuits being overloaded because people are charging 90 of them at once. Because that's gonna start fun. We're gonna start an extension cord fire at some point. We're not gonna ban extension cords, it's. So anyway, I'm glad there's some interest in it. Hyder, you're raising your hand. I recognize you.
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, totally supportive of the idea, and I agree. I think some innovation would be needed to actually make it work. I'll just tell you, I mean, a camera alone, acting as a deterrent, is, I don't know whether that's sufficient or not. And I know you were just giving an example of the deterrent, but I was in Lululemon like 2 weeks ago. There were cameras, like zillions of cameras. People just came in, grabbed tons of, clothing, cameras recording, walked out. My son was here in the Read, same thing. So I think it'll have to be beyond camera, something, and I don't know whether there are examples from other cities who have done this more successfully or not.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is we can talk about that from a security and deterrent point of view. And, there's a temptation for us to kind of improvise on that. And there's an actual whole field of people who study those problems, and we could absolutely talk to them. We can bring them into a meeting to provide public information, both for individual consumers looking to secure their property better, and for the sake of having a debate on policy where we might want to present to DOT and, in terms of a recommendation. So we're gonna take that mostly offline. Does anyone from the committee have any additional comments specifically on this resolution or the topic area that it covers?
Just a point of clarity, are we gonna ask Uni to try and come speak to us?
I was thinking we could do something with Uni called a bike through.
Love it.
I'll get in touch with you guys. I'll let you know how that develops, but I have to approach them and they have to be willing. And something I've learned about partners is that sometimes they look at a community board and they're like, and if they're not ready, and maybe we can do our own thing. We can't force them to show up, but we'll give it a good try.
Yeah, just one more thing. So in terms of a potential policy statement, would it make sense to consider, some tax incentives for the private corporations to facilitate this, like garages or basements if they're real estate, or, to come up with some sort of plan?
Yeah, we can look into that. I can talk with the council members and see if, or the budget office, there's an independent budget office, so we can ask any questions. We can do research on that. It would probably be a longer thing, but hey, then we're doing something, we're moving the ball forward.
Yeah, and I know we want to wrap this up, just to piggyback on that. If they don't come to speak with us, I think we need to know what the choke points are, because this is obviously something that's massive unmet demand, and entities trying to meet that demand and sort of unable to do it at any scale. And I think we'd love to know exactly, what is holding back that scale from taking hold. So I'd love to know what the pinch points are, if it's a bureaucratic inertia, or if it's actual policy, or if it's fiscal constraints, or if we get a clear idea of what that was.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear DOT articulate some of this for us. And they probably have a division who does that, and the divisions don't come to our meetings, they send community reps. So we try to make those connections through the community reps between the meetings. We'll try that. Jason.
I love the idea of leveraging garages. Fun fact that garages are required to provide bike parking today. From a law that was enacted probably 10 plus years ago. I've not heard of anybody taking advantage of any of those parking spaces. They're not cheap, but generally, like, they still are charging like $20 a day or more for these spaces. I would love to find a way to make them useful in a way that law failed to do so, in incentivizing them to open them up to the public for free or something along those lines, but being able to take that garage space that we have.
Well, it sounds like also you could prorate it into saying if you could put 4 bikes in the space of one spot. Just.
Well, they have the
go with
space
me for a
to
second,
allocate
that
technical
we-
charging.
So
Same.
2 or 3 years ago, we did a project
Yeah.
to ask, to do a survey about what is the possibility. Actually, it was the precedent of this. This was a prerequisite before us coming to this resolution, was to see, can we solve this with available parking concessions? And parking concessionaires wouldn't talk to us. And the going rate for parking a bicycle in a garage in Manhattan is $180 a month in the one garage that you have to pay them upfront without like a network of anything.
Yes.
It is just not an effective business model for consumers, and one could very easily get the impression that it is priced in a way to discourage use of it. And the parking concessions don't think the way that you do about, oh, I can fit 10 bicycles here and make more money. They don't want to have any part of this. They just don't want it. Parking is a notoriously seedy business.
They're required though, to offer.
Well, one thing I'm unclear, I'm aware that over the last 5 years or so, that the mandates to include X parking set asides in any new commercial residential building have now ended. So if that is the case, couldn't we advocate the opposite of actually creating minimums in buildings that go up? Same way there.
Yeah, so Manhattan does not have a construction parking minimum for any of the
Out of
buildings.
boroughs.
Just outer boroughs, Manhattan is exempt from that. And anybody who builds a parking facility in their building is doing it based on their, business sense of the market. We do hear that there is flux in the parking market, particularly because one of the things that we heard when we were discussing about endorsing congestion pricing plans way back in 2017 was that a lot of buildings have the parking facilities and they make a lot of money off of them, and that money that comes in offsets a lot of expenses for apartments and co-ops. And if there were vacancies to start opening up, it would significantly spike the living expenses for the people who lived in the buildings above them. So it was seen as kind of a housing equity thing. You can't introduce something that reduces car use. We don't think that is how everybody on CB6 feels, but this is one of the reasons why I love the idea that it points out a problem that's very real. If a parking concessionaire just leaves a residential building, it actually puts a whole group of constituents in a really bad spot they have very little control over. And if we have any solutions in terms of freight mobility uses or bike parking uses that actually make sense for this, or different concessionaires, why not? It was the same thing we were talking about, the bike delivery comfort stations. If the money is there and it's coming from the feds, why not take a disused retail space right in the middle of the district that needs to be served and solve two problems at once?
Well,
So
and
we love that kind of creativity.
to me, what we don't often do when we have these discussions is cost out the man hours for something like a stolen bike. You have cops, they're billing, and there is an aggregate that you'd be displacing by preventing loss.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a severe problem. It's, these are not just $50, $100 bikes disappearing there, The people really invest in these things and they are very expensive to replace. The wheel costs like $150 at a New York City bike shop. The locks cost $150. The minimum amount of repairs is like $35 to $45 an hour of service, and it takes the bike out of commission. It's really affecting people's transportation options to not have their bike or to have the saddle stolen off of it and whatnot. So anything we can do to help that problem, even incrementally, might be benefit. But I definitely appreciate the way you guys are creatively looking at this, throwing ideas out there. I'm not gonna form a working group at this time, but I'm definitely gonna work on this offline and talk to you guys about it. So, any other comments from the committee about this topic area? And I'm looking at the online folks as well to see if anyone has their hand raised. Do we have any comments from members of the public about this specific agenda item?
We have comments about other items, but not about this
I did see that.
specific item.
If there are no further comments, we'll move the agenda onto what our new number 3 is. Discussion of New York City Council Intro 0758-2022, which would require that every bicycle with electric assist, electric scooter, and other legalized motorized vehicle be licensed and registered. There is a pre-prepared negative resolution on this because negative resolutions have more detail and have to kind of be done. And sometimes we will do something where we prepare the two resolutions, one positive, one negative. Positive resolution in this case would be very easy to form, and I could write it down now in case that's the conclusion we come to. When this was suggested to me by members of the committee, it was an entirely negative resolution proposal. So I haven't heard anybody has any points on this. The resolution is up on the screen. We do not have to abide by any of these whereases. We can edit this live, and we can also edit the formation of the resolves, which is truly the critical part. So the meat of this resolution is this potential legislation, due to reasons stated in the whereases, would be recommended to not be passed due to the harm that it would cause. When we get to the resolves, we'll see the other part that it essentially recommends.
You can even scroll straight to the resolve clause.
Yeah, just go straight to the resolve. The second resolve reiterates the recommendations from the e-mobility resolution in June 2023, where we did discuss this exact problem with mopeds and bicycles, and we had a number of recommendations that we, as a full board, ratified. So we do want the council to consider that. We want the council members to have a response on that. If some of our council members are actually taking legislative direction on this, then I think it's not that they're just too busy to look at it or it's a low priority for them, but that we should get some acknowledgement on that. And the third resolve is essentially, after talking to some people who are familiar with this space, takes sympathy for the argument that a class 3 bicycle is essentially a low-powered moped. I do think that there are very distinct aspects of both of those kinds of vehicles, but we can potentially pass some policy that is incremental here, that requires the registration of those particular bicycles, but in a way that is not entirely disruptive or discouraging to consumers. And also addresses some of the compliance issues with the original legislation, which is not even to say that the end result is disagreeable, but there's just a lot of unstated things in that legislation. And there's no, I have talked to some people on the legislation side of this and policy side of it, and they think that this is going to get amended and fleshed out a little bit more. But unlike with Intro 501, the thing with enforcing the parking, with taking phone photos, the amendments did not come out very quickly. In order to make the bill possible, this one has kind of been out all year and has slowly picked up sponsors who I don't think can really articulate why they're signing on to this. Larry?
Generally supportive of this as written, but I do have a question about the very last clause, the exemption. Is there a particular rationale for that? Because it seems to run contrary to what precedes it.
It would ease adoption and compliance, because devices that would be sold new would have this as sort of a baked in expectation. And it would mean that people who are buying the bikes are getting it right away. But another aspect of this is people who already own these bikes, instead of having to haul them into a police department or haul them into a bike shop to become compliant and being at risk of some level of enforcement not described by this bill for not being in compliance, that we would just expect those devices to sunset. These bikes are not quite disposable items, but they kind of are. They do wear out. The council can consider this suggestion and maybe say something like, you're due to do this on your next bike shop visit or something like this. But I do think that if you start it with the new devices, it would absolutely work its way into the broader market in the next 3 to 5 years. So I think as a concession to having the industry work on a design that is acceptable for this, that might ease in a lot and be fairer to consumers than the thing that just sort of like dumps this onto everybody who has invested in these devices and doesn't have the space for an automotive license plate on it.
I think it creates an enforcement problem with respect to the shops. And ensuring that they basically are the enforcing agent. There doesn't seem to be any budgetary consideration as to setting up a mechanism to make sure that they're in compliance and not claiming that, oh, these bikes that are in the shop are all here for repairs and they don't need to be licensed.
I don't think a shop would be fined for a compliance issue here because there's no such thing mentioned in the legislation that's being proposed. So they have no risk in this whatsoever at the moment.
Is there a penalty?
No, there's nothing, one of the things about this is that there's nothing even described in terms of penalties. It is just illegal. I think that is an irresponsible level of vagueness in an intro that has 33 co-sponsors on it. Jerry, you had a comment?
Simply, does DOT take a position on this?
No.
Because, circling back to earlier, the likelihood that they would actually implement this. Sorry.
Brendan, do we see Colleen on the list still? Let me search.
Would it be DOT implementing it, right? Would it be NYPD to enforce it?
Well, we know their position on it.
Well, DOT is enumerated in here.
You don't see Colleen.
I think one thing too, and as I drafted this is a shortcoming that we cite something about NYPD, but that needs an actual citation. Otherwise, it should be removed.
So that was one of the, whereas.
Yeah, one of the whereases. If you scroll up a little bit,
Maintains. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard anything.
we have. Hold on one second, because we have questions. There's a lot of people asking questions. And a lot of these people are asking off agenda. We do have somebody from Streets Blog on the line, but I don't think they're gonna know exactly where the citation is gonna be, because that's something Streets Blog has covered in the past about proposals to add requirements essentially to bicycle owners, and whether NYPD recognizes in an official way that this is a problem that needed addressing.
So I can say anecdotally within this district, there have been incidents that have taken place where NYPD has not been able to identify the individuals on the either site bicycles, mopeds, e-bikes, whatever the device may be. And they have to then use, rely on the traditional means of video and witnesses and all of that to identify the suspect. So I wouldn't put in any, it may not be a widespread issue. I can't say exactly, what percentage of incidents, they're identified immediately, but I can say with confidence that in this district, there have been more than a couple of incidents.
Yeah.
In the past few months even.
My understanding of it is that it's kind of, if you cannot trace video of a bicycle user to a direct owner or something like that, you have to almost treat it like it's an assault. And you have to use video footage to try to trace where the individual might have been visiting or come from and put out, information about that. And I think that the nuance of what NYPD's position on it is that we don't have more problems finding bicyclists who commit hit and runs than we have finding anybody else that we need to find. We don't have less problems, but we don't have more problems. But that's, again, needs a citation, so maybe we should just take out that whereas.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reliable data that we could say one way or the other, how much of an issue it is in terms of the overall number of crimes or traffic incidents that occur in a given area, or, the number of stops, where there's an accident or something.
Yeah, Curiously, no such rationale is also attached to the intro that's going to create this whole system of tracking. So, yeah. Yeah. Rock?
Yeah, I like the nuance of this resolution. We're separating out these class one pedal assist e-bikes, and City Bike is even decreasing the speed that they go at. The new generation City Bike, I believe, from 20 miles an hour to, I believe, 18 miles an
So are they
hour.
really? That's unfortunate.
And so I think separating that out, I think, is important. And like you said, if it's a throttle bike that can go 25 miles an hour or faster, it certainly seems reasonable to register that. My question is, for this group, is there's 20,000 about city e-bikes, they're pedal assist, and they're going to double to 40,000. And where does that play in this resolution for a city bike?
I know Councilmember Holden expects those bicycles to have those to apply for this. He is very against them, and he has been outspoken about his opposition to them. One of the issues with city bikes is the entire length of the program. There have been many public complaints that, you know, is people on city bike, you can't identify them, there ought to be a number on them. There are actually like 2 or 3 very large bike identification numbers on every city bike. And this is not true with privately owned bikes, but it is true with all the city bikes. So City Bike has done something to make those bikes identifiable, and in particular, City Bike knows who's using the bike unless it's stolen, because it's a leased user who's taking it out. I believe NYPD has been able to track City Bike users who have been involved in hit and runs because of those numbers and because of video surveillance footage. And so I'm glad that City Bike has that. And the city itself and DOT have taken that initiative to make that job easier. That could be a way forward for an identification system if it's applied to anything, in the sense that automotive style license plates are probably a very clumsy idea, but a large identification number printed somewhere on the bike in some format that involved a minimum of hardware installation, it was actually a very reasonable installation, could be part of a functional system. Brendan, you were going to say something?
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Okay,
Good call.
Jason.
When we talk about class 3 bikes, e-bikes, those are throttle e-bikes, correct?
They're pure throttle bikes that they have the ability to be pedaled. They're not mopeds, but their acceleration power can take them in the range of 18 to 25 miles an hour. And for the most part, this is almost universally now used by delivery app workers, that everybody can just sit and hold the throttle pretty much all day and just zoom up and down the streets.
So we're, just to be clear, we're not talking about mopeds.
We're not talking about mopeds.
So just my personal opinion, I have no problem, less of a problem with registering mopeds. I am concerned.
They're required to be registered by.
Correct, although some can't because they don't have VINs yet. So I would support solving that problem and like figuring out how we can register mopeds that don't have VINs so that they can be registered. I do have concerns about class 3 bikes being registered. I do appreciate that they operate at a higher speed, but I am concerned by creating a burden for what's effectively an electric bike and allowing this, creating an exception to allow for these bikes to, or to require these bikes to be registered. I don't see them that differently as other bicycles, in my opinion.
How does commercial use figure in on that? Do you think that registration would be a fair thing to have, like essentially a delivery license for the city, as long as it was something that was low impact in terms of registration and identification?
I just don't, I don't see, I'm concerned about the practicality of requiring the e-bike, even in a commercial setting, given how the current market of deliveries operate, where it's like an all primarily a independent contractor system. And I also worry about the ability to distinguish between class 2 and class 3 bikes.
This is a big problem here, and it might have to be something that we work on with the language here. Because I definitely saw a problem here where we are asking for something to be enforced on bikes that cannot be determined from afar.
And even up close, I think there's somewhat of an inability from the public, from law enforcement in some situations to distinguish between, and just to know between the difference of mopeds, class 3, class 2, class 1, I guess is fairly straightforward. I don't think it's easy for most people, even with some training, to be able to easily identify the difference between these types of bikes.
B has had her hand raised. I'm sorry, B, if you've been waiting for a while, but I recognize you.
No problem. And I think my picture is off, so I don't know if you see me or not.
I see
'Cause
you.
Okay, so I have the same question that was just articulated. I think identification of, I never believe in legislation that you try to do that's not enforceable or, to distinguish or a penalty. So to me, I dislike the introduction that this, the city council was doing. And also, I think there's so many different classes of bikes that I don't believe that this is enforceable or that will solve the problem. So I'm more against the resolution that the city council is doing. And I'm not too sure our resolution resolves the issue, Brian. And the second thing I was going to ask, maybe Brian knows and of the 36 council people that signed on, did all of ours sign on?
33 council members currently, there was 34 at one point, but then Councilmember Rita Joseph took her name off the bill earlier last week. Councilmember Rivera has not signed on to it. Councilmember Powers has, Councilmember Menon has. Most of the Manhattan council members have as well.
So I think they're trying to resolve a perception problem and what they perceive as a political problem, but it's not realistic in the approach.
Gabe, and then Matt.
I just want to piggyback on what Pete said there precisely. All legislation has unintended consequences. This one is not remotely clear what the intended consequences are. I will actually let the mask slip a little bit. And this is grievance politics pretending to be public policy. And we should not treat it as a good faith attempt to solve an actual problem. The things people are upset about, bikes on sidewalks, already illegal, unregistered mopeds, already illegal.
Matt?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, yeah, I think the last couple of comments really hit on where this is coming from. It's more the community crying that they're afraid to walk on the sidewalk because bicycles, mopeds, e-bikes are traveling, in all different directions. At any given moment, which is an emotional concern that's also real. But I think part of the issue is these people are, wearing masks and hoodies or hats, really to obscure their identity. So I do see a need to, somehow identify them. I would also point out that this bill, may be in conflict with, pending state legislation as well, and the state generally issues, motor vehicle laws and stuff like that. And also, what would stop somebody, obviously it's not enforceable, but, what if somebody goes to Long Island or Westchester and gets a bike, an e-bike and is now in New York City? Well, how do you manage that? So, I mean, I just think it's a logistical nightmare. There has to be a better way to, identify the culprits that are committing violations on our streets. Whereas this legislation opens up a lot of things that are just, they're just unclear at this point.
Larry?
And to just go back to my first point, there's no enforcement.
Right.
No mechanism.
There's no resources either.
That's right.
Jason?
Just quickly, we also have a problem with vehicles that are required to have license plates today, and those being visible as previously discussed. So I further am pessimistic on the prospect of requiring additional implementation of license plates, which are not being effectively enforced.
If you need your bike license plate, just bend the corner over. I do not suggest anyone commit a crime, okay? And I personally have no problem registering my personal devices with the city. And much of my concern is that this is just a free-flowing harm thing, to the extent that I would even get stopped on my Bianchi, which is no motor on it whatsoever, and I would just get like almost, because the police do this with motorcycles. They have full dragnet stops that they just stop every motorcycle and do like an equipment check, do a registration check, and there isn't any individual stop. It doesn't have any sense of purpose, but it's something that is allowed to kind of go on. And motorcyclists, they do try to organize against these things, and you know, they actually tell each other on like Slack and Twitter, like, you know, where the stops are. So it's like a big cat and mouse game, very silly. I wouldn't want that to be replicated in another form of transportation if we can already see this kind of stuff coming. But I would say, yes, I see a lot of problems in the fact that this intro is unclear, but it could pass as is tomorrow, which is the reason why I put it on the agenda, to try to kind of get in front of it. I don't have a lot of confidence in that third resolved clause anymore. I put it there suggestively and thought we might be able to try to hammer something out. My feeling right now, you can just cut the whole thing. And then make sure that the rest of the resolution that can be tidied up. I don't feel perfect about submitting something that doesn't have a productive solution, but I guess our e-mobility resolution that we worked on at the committee is an attempt to solve the problem, and we want visibility on that. I would love it if other council members outside of our district looked at those ideas too, and we're happy to champion for them. I would really love it if our council members would champion for them, and it's an attempt to do that as well. Brendan.
Yeah, one thing that maybe could be done, you know, to highlight what the community board has already suggested is perhaps in the final resolution, linking to that June 2023 resolution.
Yes, we can just put that as an edit overnight tonight, because
Yeah,
I feel like I want this to go to the committee for a quick check. You know, it's on the screen right now, and as long as the resolve clauses stay as is when we vote on it, and the link is the only addition, that we can clean up the whereases with a quick check for the committee tomorrow. If that is agreeable to everyone here, I see no objections from anyone here.
I have a minor comment. Would it be more effective to summarize some of the recommendations there rather than link to it? Because I suspect elected officials may or may not click on the link.
I can write a summary statement. Yeah, I don't think it doesn't change the substance.
Yeah.
With that, I'll move the question. Second.
Got the question on the floor to adopt the resolution as stated, with the potential to edit the whereases for clarity and relevance.
whereas a result,
Hmm?
whereas a result, because I know.
They're just the two we got the two resolve clauses, and we have some whereases that will clean up, but otherwise the resolves will stay as is. And I'll add a summary of June 2023 to the second resolve, which is not you know, it doesn't impact the statement of the resolution. So it'll just be some cleanup work I do tonight. So that is what we would be voting on right now, and I think we should do a roll call vote.
Okay, so when I call your name, please say whether you're in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. B. Disman,
In favor.
Barack Friedman,
Favor.
Jason Promowitz.
In favor.
Matt Roberts,
In favor.
Larry Shire,
In favor.
Abe Turzo,
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
In favor.
Jerry Weinstein,
In favor.
and Heidi Zaidi.
Oppose.
Okay, with 8 in favor, 1 opposed, and no abstentions, the resolution passes.
Okay, moving on to our next.
Brian, can I interject so I don't have to say the whole meeting?
Yes, you might.
Okay, my name is Bob Cohen. I was a public member for 35 years. I worked for DOT enforcement for 20. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention is the bus lane on Second Avenue between 38th and 23rd. Specifically between the hours of 2 and 7. If you've ever been there, the MTA uses that bus lane to park their own vehicles to lay over. And that's where you have Amazon, other trucks, mail trucks, etc. As you said before, if it's not enforceable, there's no sense having it. So I'd like to see that the MTA turn off their bus cameras as long as they're gonna use the bus lane for something other than.
We're gonna look into
I'll
this.
call you back.
We're gonna look into this, and this is, I mean, this was a problem 9 years ago too. The area around 36th Street and the post office and the tunnel and, the illegal parking around there, we can take a look at that.
And also, if you go up Third Avenue about 5:30, every single day I see a bus or two double parked between 34th and 36th on the west side when they don't need to be double parked.
Yes, bus parking has been one of our transportation's, big, asks in the, district needs statement for a number of years now. We've had a lot of spots in the district around the Queens Midtown Tunnel where buses, instead of laying over in Queens in the designated lot, have to stay in the city because they don't have enough time to turn around. And then that causes a lot of problems. We just don't have the room for it on the streets. So that's for that.
I'll call you back. And lastly, when I worked for enforcement, we had what was known as feeding the meters. I don't know if you know what that means, but meter signs have hours on them. 1 hour, 2 hours, 6 hours. Seems that the city now allows you to park there all day as long as you pay. The purpose of the meter, when I was involved in the 80s and 90s, was to move the people in, do their business, leave, and have a turnover. Now it looks like it's just a money-making thing, and I don't think that's the way to run a meter operation.
Is that, NYPD traffic enforcement?
Well, it's them or it's DOT's rule now, that as long as you pay, you can stay there.
Yeah, I almost want to talk to NYPD about this just because I feel like they would have to have.
So it used to be,
They want to talk
we
to me
went
more.
out,
But
and it was a
we'll look
1 hour
into it.
meter with chalk or the street. And then if we came back after the hour, we'd write a ticket for overtime parking. Now, all you gotta do is, first of all, you don't even have to put a receipt in anymore. They should require you at least the first hour to put you, when you park, to put a receipt, so people who are good government people can see that you at least paid. Now you can use your phones and everything and your apps and just continue to pay all day.
Yeah, and I know that that's a big priority for a lot of people who are involved in retail businesses here in the city, where they drive into the city to open their business when they want to, and then they start doing the meter feeding thing. And those are some of the constituents that have the most concerns when we do conversions of parking, because we are almost definitely putting them out personally. And it comes through us through the lens of customer access that people will not be able to get in
And
the
I'll leave
store.
you just the thing I summarized.
Larry, real quick.
This is
I
in
apologize,
response,
everyone.
this is in response to Bob Cohen's comment. To solve this problem, and I'm not certain that it is a problem in reality, but if it is, that there is no time limit for increasing your parking payment through the Muni meters via the app. There would be through computer coding a way to put a stop to feeding additional money in there with something that would come up on your phone. It says you're approaching the 2 hour limit. You can't buy any more parking. Move.
But that doesn't happen.
You could.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was our next agenda item in the new order? Was it East River crossings for mopeds, or did we move that back in the agenda, or was it the daylighting
My understanding was that it was the East River crossings for mopeds.
Okay, our next agenda item is discussion about East River crossings for mopeds. And this is a little bit more free-forming, we might have to come back to this next month. So with some research, I have found that the slower speed mopeds that can go up to 30 miles an hour. And what are the class names for them? They're like class C, class B, class A, and there might even be a reversed order. So there is a slower speed of moped and they are allowed on the bridges technically, and they have to use the right lane and stay to the side.
On the motor vehicle lanes.
On the motor vehicle lanes of the bridge, not on the bike lanes. And this is just so highly impractical because the cars are going like 55 miles an hour. And one of the, also, like I was on the Manhattan Bridge once on a Revel, you know, both for Revel and for me.
In the traffic.
Being on the, so I was legally on the Manhattan Bridge because they had a period of time where they allowed you to cross the East River with them. And the Manhattan Bridge surface is just so pockmarked that it's just very bad riding a Revel style motor scooter on it. So the thing is, it is legal. I was under the impression that DOT and state law restricted use of such vehicles on roadways that had speed limits around the 35, 45 miles an hour, that it would be seen as impeding traffic plus be a you know, a real risk to anybody. But for the moment, there is legal crossings of the East River with the mopeds, as long as it's not in the tunnels, because the tunnels are not allowed to use for sure. I don't believe they have that access. And this, the way that mopeds use the crossings as a side problem from the way that mopeds operate on the surface streets of the district. The moped problem on the bridges is that they are taking the bike lanes instead of the vehicle lanes that they need to take.
Isn't it the same problem?
Well, the moped, I mean, they're on sidewalks also in Midtown, so that's another thing. I think the surface street problem is a lot more extensive and it involves you know, a broader range of law enforcement. In this case, it's a very simple thing: don't use the bike lane. But I thought I'd bring this up, and I'm also sympathetic to the idea that I don't know if we have any moped users on the meeting tonight. But sympathetic to the idea that moped users have sort of the same problem that bikes did pre-2008 in the city, in which you're asking them to share vehicle lanes with traffic, and the differences between the vehicles and lack of compliance from very, very big vehicles is just way too great. But that doesn't mean that they should take the law in their own hands either. But that's a problem we might be able to recommend as a longer range thing to figure out if there's any sort of productive recommendation we can make on that. And it again comes down to the fact, I know it's exhausting for us to talk about all this stuff, like, can we talk to DOT about a productive solution? And is DOT interested in acknowledging our communication with them? Yeah, I would say, you know, at the very least, the Queensboro Bridge is in our district, and we might be able to take a look at that. I don't expect us to think about that at this meeting, though. We might have to take that offline. So, has anybody heard anything? Anybody have any context on this? Jason?
So I'm training for a marathon in 2 weeks, and I've been running extensively across several of the East River crossings on a fairly regular basis as a result of that. It's very scary, especially in Queensboro. There's very limited space when you are in a limited space and quickly have a very large, fast-moving vehicle pass you in that confined space, and it is a very dangerous situation. And it's an issue that we do. I'm very happy for us to address this. I think the Queensboro is probably the worst with this problem, given the confined space, but the Williamsburg Bridge also is problematic because there's a bunch of sections where there's one section, the Manhattan side, where there's the bike lane right adjacent to pedestrian space, but also as a bike on all these spaces, it's the same problem. The mopeds go by very quickly, small, tight space, and yeah. So I think we should address this, and I don't have a perspective of the mopeds on the best solution for how they can get across, but I'm supportive of them getting allocated dedicated space on the roadway as a solution.
All right, Jason, how close were you when you almost got clipped?
I mean, I don't know if I almost got clipped, it's scary, I mean, it's, the Queensboro, I mean, is probably the length of maybe a wide bike lane, the pedestrian path, and that's shared for bikes and pedestrians, so especially as you get on the crossing into or the entryway into Manhattan, it gets a bit narrower.
The hairpin turns.
Yeah, and hairpin turns, yeah, exactly. So it can be very close. I mean, again, I didn't really almost get clipped. It just like, it's very startling in the proximity and the speed that some of these vehicles can pass.
Just a related issue is there is a plan to open the South roadway for pedestrian use, and I think that's directly related because all this illegal moped use, and even if there wasn't illegal moped use, there's so many bicycles going back and forth on the 59th Street Bridge. So I don't know if we have a resolution or not talking about that, or what DOT is still, it's been stalled for quite a while. Not sure if that's something that DOT could expedite for us reiterating how dangerous the 59th Street Bridge is right now.
We did pass the supportive resolution for that. So did the other community boards in the range of the bridge. The council members on both sides of the bridge covering that territory have been advocating for this to be installed. DOT, their public statements, to my knowledge, have been that they are doing the long-term rehabilitation of the bridge, we have a completion date, just keeps slipping. And it just is always 2 years into the future. And with the amount of crowding on the north outer roadway, and the fact that the south outer roadway isn't even a limited time frame roadway, that it's not actually open all the time. That would, I mean, we can nudge DOT on this, and I think we should, and everybody is kind of nudging them on it, and it's like, I'm only stating this for the sense of my personal perspective to the public, is that this should be a neighborhood advocacy thing. Like, this would really help a lot of people, especially in terms of tourism, especially in terms of the views on the south outer roadway for the tourists. That would actually be a nice thing, and that's like kind of what they're doing up at the George Washington Bridge right now.
We're really gonna get tourists in Queensboro?
Yeah,
You think so?
it's very packed over there.
Beautiful.
I mean, I agree, it's beautiful. I just feel like that part of town is like not like, and the Queensboro is not like a tourist attraction in itself.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think so, but like, they can kind of get around now. I got City Bike. Also, there are a lot of people who are taking trips kind of around to that area because they can take the tram to Roosevelt Island, but how do they get up to the bridge? They still don't have that access directly to the bridge anymore. But if they go over to Long Island City for anything, and I mean, there's like 6 breweries over there and like a bunch of sandwich shops, and it's like, I mean, it's not like it was 10 years ago. There's a lot to do in Long Island City.
Yeah.
So yes, walking over there is actually perhaps a big attraction. But we should also think ambitiously like that. Like, why wouldn't the Queensboro Bridge be something you want to visit?
Yeah, sure.
But anyway, so yeah, dedicated moped space. I know it's real tight on that bridge, but we can think about that. We can bend that around. But I know that issue just keeps coming up to us in terms of community complaints. And then there's always a risk that if we feel like we're kind of deadlocked on it and there's no easy solution out of it, then somebody would just kind of decide for us that that more moped restrictions come down, which will, that would probably have pretty big impacts, but we should absolutely look into it, especially with the amount of moped traffic coming around everywhere lately. Just to note, because of some shifts in some of the stuff, including like a lot of the buildings, get freaking out about lithium ion batteries, moped issues shifting to a gas moped issue. So our e-mobility bill doesn't exactly cover the whole thing, but in any case, the gas mopeds have been legal for forever. And they definitely need some sort of safe passage around these byways and whatnot, but specifically on the East River crossings, like there is something wrong going on there with the amount of mopeds that choose to use those bike lanes to get over. And if that's how that's how thousands of people are regularly getting to work every day, then it's not built very well for it. Any other suggestions or comments about this agenda item?
Is one of the solutions like lowering the speed limit on the bridges in such that the mopeds would feel more comfortable operating in the roadway as opposed to dedicating? I mean, I'm supportive of dedicating space to them as well, but is that an option on the table? I don't know if people have thoughts on
Isn't
We're free to recommend it.
isn't the citywide speed limit 25 miles an hour? What is it on the arterial on the bridge?
35. And that means effectively, it means that 40, 45.
But I guess that's also a road design problem. Like, can you span the roadways of the bridges in order to prevent people from operating at 45 miles an hour?
And the other thing is, is the actual roadway engineered for mopeds so that they can move safely on them? Do they have like gaps and other nasty features that they just assume that cars will be able to transit effectively, and they don't expect bikes or mopeds to be on the bridge at all? I mean, and those are things that are a little harder for us to walk through around because, you know.
I would keep an eye out for some postmortem reporting on Revel to see if there's any takeaways that might inform this discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, Rebel, they get called out a lot for the things that happened. But a lot of that doesn't mention that issues were addressed, and they don't really talk about how they were addressed. And Rebel is simply not going to exist for the moped thing because they've been pulling back on it. Their fleet probably needs a ton of service to find their own fleet, and they're just declining to obtain a new fleet. Even people have reached out to buy the mopeds, and they said, no, we're recycling them. They're getting rid of them.
That was the news that that all the machines are going to be recycled, and so they'll disappear.
Revel, the company, has gotten into other businesses, and that has been their focus. So it's just like writing up
Battery charging, for example.
Yeah,
And a ride share.
a ride share, because we all needed another one of those.
I actually like what they're doing.
Well, it's cheap now because they're offering everybody discounts. So.
Not just for that reason. They're full-time employees. They're doing some good things.
You had a comment?
Yeah, can you put like, speed bumps or like things to keep the moped slower on the walkway?
Yes, we discussed that actually in the e-mobility resolution from June, but that was one of the design interventions that we thought of. So, you know, these are kind of things that we did outside of meeting research on this stuff. We actually have a toolkit that we can recommend, and we'd love to hear DOT pilot some of this stuff in places where it would be sensitive so that we can reduce injuries.
Yeah, the sad thing is you actually probably need more injuries if you work at it.
I think we've had a productive conversation. Does anyone have a motion? We don't need one
We
today.
want a resolution on reducing the speed limit and reducing I don't know, I mean, maybe.
You know what? If we don't have a motion now, I will work on it on the side. We'll put it back on the agenda sometime soon. Seeing no additional feedback, we will move the agenda. Is our next item discussion of daylighting at street intersections?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to note we have an attendee, Colin Brown. Colin Brown works at Sam Schwartz Engineering. Thank you for Barack for making that connection. I just see Colin Brown, AICP Transportation Planner for Sam Schwartz Engineering. And this is in relation to the agenda item for daylighting and street intersections, which is based on resolution work that has passed at other community boards in the city and covers both an intro before the city council to improve daylighting, as well as an ask for the city to stop opting out of state law for daylighting. So the background on that is that New York state law is that 20 feet must be kept clear between the crosswalk and the parking lane on corners. New York City has a written exemption to say that they can make their own law on this. And that New York City doesn't have to adhere to state law, and the city opts out of that by allowing parking right up to the crosswalks on all the streets. And part of the enforcement problems is that then they go into the crosswalks and whatnot too, so. Do we have any of the documentation that we sent around? We have Gabe's resolution.
Yes, which I
in
can
particular.
share
Please do.
on screen.
And also please promote Colin to a panelist so that he can speak on this.
Okay, Colin is joining as a panelist.
Colin, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Do you want to add any background information before we get into the meat of this written resolution that was distributed to the committee?
Sure, yeah, I'll just briefly mention and thank you, Brian and Brock, for bringing me on. I'll just kind of at a very high level mention it. It seems like this has already been discussed with this committee, but from a kind of purely street safety design standpoint, daylighting as an intervention is something that we try to incorporate in our designs as much as possible, and has a pretty well documented history of being an effective treatment for improving safety, particularly for pedestrians at intersections. So it's something that we kind of certainly can objectively support in terms of design and its efficacy in terms of a safe systems approach, but happy to talk on it in more details or answer any questions if folks have them.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the screen share of the pre-written resolution so that we can see the resolved clauses.
There we go.
Thank you. So, and this language seems to be all right. I think the first and second resolves are technically redundant, but if that has a better legibility than condensing it into one resolve clause, then I'm happy to leave it as is. Larry, you have a comment?
Brian, I think it reads better if you reverse the order of the first and second resolves.
Okay. Then so be it. So we'll just switch the ordering of those for legibility. The only other thing is to display intro 854A. Do we have a link for that? If not, I'll search for it.
Is that like a fairly new resolution? Or what's the history?
Yeah, so it's currently being discussed for the city council. There's essentially they're asking the DOT to identify 100 intersections per year in the city to install physical barriers to physically prevent parking within the daylighting area. That'll expire in like 2032 or something, should they not see results. But essentially it's to make it literally impossible to park there.
And I'm putting both the link and the summary field in the chat. Brendan, the link can be accessed from there.
Just hold on a moment, I was having some.
Okay, I'm gonna read out the summary while Brendan configures the screen. This bill requires that the Department of Transportation study safety benefits of daylighting and daylighting barriers and implement daylighting at a minimum of 100 intersections a year, beginning on January 1st, 2025. DOT would also be required to install daylighting barriers in intersections where daylighting has been implemented, subject to the commissioner's determination. Commissioner may determine to cease implementation of daylighting at 100 intersections a year on or after January 1st, 2030, if additional daylighting would not meaningfully contribute to the safety of motorists, pedestrians, or cyclists, and the commission notifies the speaker of such determination, the speaker of the council. DOT must annually report on the locations at which daylighting has been implemented and discontinued. Seems like a pretty soft set of asks. So, there's a lot of optionality for the transportation commissioner on this one. So, I think, one concern that could come up is like, is this a mandate that can be met in a rational sense? Is this just adding a gigantic administrative burden to the city that they're guaranteed to not meet? I think it's achievable considering it's 100 intersections a year.
I think it sounds way too low to me.
That was.
It does. We can always write a whereas where we ask for an increase in it. B, you have your hand up? B, you have the floor. I
I'm
think
not
you're-
unmuting. I just unmuted. So because it is minimal and it's the start, I was going to move the question.
One second. Nice, we got a second. Guess we're calling the question, and does anyone want to actually move to make a modification? B, do you mind if we made that modification to ask for a greater number? Or is that-
I actually thought starting with 100, so you don't know the cost and all of that, you could always, once you start, add the grader. So I thought we were being pretty reasonable in our starting.
Okay, and the rest of it would just be a prohibition that, there may be some signage upgrades that could come in gradually, but, that it would just be policy for the city to not install that anymore. I think that's the impression of the other, resolve. Again, it's a pretty soft ask for administrative purposes. It could ramp up and we could revisit it on that. That's a potential direction for us.
Can I ask for a friendly amendment? Could we, I think I got that terminology right?
Only.
Yeah.
We have a dollar jar that you have to put in whenever you say friendly amendment.
Could we emphasize that the daylighting should be physically create physical barriers? Because a lot of the daylighting that DOT has done without physical barriers, I believe, has been ineffective.
It's in the intro.
Okay.
Very good. No, I was gonna say that's, yeah.
Just gonna say, is this 100 in all of New York City? Staten Island, is that, or is it just CB6? Because
It's 100.
you could just put like 100 in Staten Island and,
Last year, we actually looked it up. There's 13,000 lit intersections in the city of New York. Yeah.
I would request an amendment, 100 in CB6.
B, what do you think?
I think you have to be realistic, and you have to ask for something that's doable and that, given the budgets and stuff. So I'm okay moving it up, to 200. 100 is just a number that you start with and you see if you're even getting a response to that. But I could go a little higher, but I just don't want us to go so high and concentrate it just within our area. You can say a proportionality within our area. I don't know how many exist in our area now, what this would mean. I think you need to do a little more of that research before you said within your area.
So I have a quick suggestion. 200 per year and 10 in our district. That's our resolved modification. Does anyone have an opposition to making that amendment to the resolve? Do you oppose it or you have something to say?
500.
I've got a quick proposal. Good.
500 is a big number, I think.
But if we're talking about 10,000,
13,000.
13,000, I think 500
It
might
would
be a
sit
good.
better if you said that and also added out of 13,000.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
Get that exact number again.
So
Out of approximately 13,000, 500 per year, to eat into the approximate total number of 13,000.
And again, B makes a very good point that we didn't do the research to figure out whether DOT has the capacity and the budget to do those kind of things. Where with 200, it does seem like it would be incidental with street repaving.
It's just, the idea here is to make a suggestion to push them, to be ambitious rather than just lip service.
Yeah, they're not doing too good on the ambitious part. Brendan, is there a way we can kind of just sort of like flip on this? Maybe we'll just vote whether it's gonna be 500 or 200, just to prep us before actually having the thing for the main resolution?
Yeah,
Yeah. All right, so the two options on the board,
just to interrupt, I also see Hyder has his hand
oh,
raised.
yeah, you have the floor.
I had a question. Would it actually make sense to include verbiage to say, and I don't know whether 854A specifies how to select the 100. Is there some risk tiering, some notion of where it's going to be, adding value the most? I mean, is there, or is it random 100? It doesn't specify anything.
It's the commissioner's choice, and on one hand, they're not specifying that. On the other hand, we don't have any information on that prepared right now either. One thing is that we would follow up the process by submitting recommendations to DOT should this get passed.
Okay, fair enough.
Jason,
Could we kick the number question by just supporting the resolution supporting the city council bill and then passing a new resolution specifically asking for daylighting at either specific intersections or a specific number within our district, separate from this city council bill?
I'm
wondering if that might be
we'll get to the same debate on another night. That'll be the thing.
I guess I'm understanding, Jason is opposed to saying 100 intersections per year citywide, but just to focus on our district, a minimum in our district.
Which is like, we support what's being proposed in city council, that like the city council should require DOT to implement daylighting. And then separately, we should also go to DOT and say, hey, we want intersections in our district daylighted.
Why don't we do it be a further resolve that our goal is to add daylighting to 10 intersections per district. Add 10 daylighted intersections in the district per year for the length of the bill.
In CB's, it's
in our district, yeah.
Not opposed to that, but I think something more, I think I would love to see a more strong resolution asking for further daylighting within CB6 that's stronger than what's, to B's point, I think it'll be hard to mandate a larger number in the city council bill. But I think we as Community Board 6 could ask for more ambitious goals within CB6 beyond what would be required across the city.
And I think the way that we're structuring it now, by not asking the bigger question of the citywide number and focusing on the intersections that we're implementing in our district, that we are dodging the debate about what the DOT capacity is.
Yeah.
And that gets the rest of this passed a lot sooner. So,
I would suggest that your amendment make that ask, and I'll second it.
So we don't need anything official because we're kind of in the call the question zone. I'm being sloppy here with the parliamentary procedure. I think, the substance of this, we agree that we want to do. I think the language that we have, does anyone have any objections to the language as stated?
With the minimum 100 per year, that's what we were looking to substitute.
It's in the intro.
That's the city council bill.
Yeah, that's the city council.
Oh, you're talking about an additional whereas for the district.
No, it's an additional resolve for the district.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it'll be at the bottom. Just because the font stuff is like blocking the way with the highlight.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just get those resolves on there. And then again, we'll clean up the whereas language as needed because the need of the resolution is there.
Yeah.
Matt, you have a question?
So shouldn't some sort of safety metrics drive the conversation as to where daylighting should take place first?
We will drive that when we're at the community board level, and should this pass, then we will start making the recommendations and we'll do it.
Because there's nothing, other than the commissioner's discretion, there's really nothing that mentions anything about, because we do have some dangerous intersections in our district that probably should be addressed, but.
Well, you could modify the language there. It says, hopes for at least 10 of these intersections with a focus on the most dangerous ones.
It should be common sense, but
I think that's a good compromise, by the way, because you're giving them where you want to put them.
Yes, edit the language that with a focus on the most dangerous intersections. Does anyone have any objections to the language as stated? If not, we will move to a vote. Brendan will take a roll call. This is to adopt the resolution as stated.
Can I comment before the vote?
No, sorry, but I will ask you right afterward.
Okay, when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. B. Disman,
In favor?
Brock Friedman,
In favor.
Jason Stromowitz,
In favor.
Matt Roberts,
In favor.
Larry Shire,
In favor.
Gabe Terzo,
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
In favor.
Jerry Weinstein,
In favor.
and Haider Zaidi.
In favor.
Okay, with 9 in favor, nobody opposed or abstaining, the resolution passes. And you said, Brian, that there's some whereas language that will need to be.
Yeah, just bounce the resolution back to me and I will clean it up and I'll do it with someone's help.
Yep, sounds good. Just keep in mind full board Wednesday.
I know, I get it back to you by tomorrow morning. Colin, thank you for joining us. Colin Brown from Sam Schwartz Engineering. Thank you for the intro on that. Sorry, we didn't have a ton of questions for you.
Can I ask a question for Don?
Yeah, go ahead, real
So,
quick.
while he's here, is there, if we're talking about prioritizing intersections and like identifying intersections, are there bad intersections for daylighting? Like, or should we be looking at daylighting all intersections?
Yeah, it's pretty much a universal treatment, so I wouldn't say there's any specific intersections that you wouldn't implement it on, with maybe the exception of some of the more irregular intersections, that it's more of a bespoke treatment when you get to those examples. But in general, it's pretty applicable to all kind of normalized intersections across, certainly within CV6. Across the normal city grid. So I would say generally it's pretty applicable to all of the intersection scenarios that you'd be encountering.
We had a question from the public.
CV6 in Queens has a really good resolution that says, to prioritize intersections within a 1 block radius of a school, senior center, or facility for the disabled. And then also the community board will work with DOT to identify additional high priority intersections.
Brendan, take a note on that language that he just said, not because we need it in the resolution, but because it's going to inform our follow-up later on. What was the language?
Well, it's just Queens CV6 resolution on it.
Yeah, they said that they prioritize schools.
Schools, senior centers, facilities for the disabled. And then the community board will work with DOT to identify additional intersections. I would also say intersections near NYPD station should be prioritized because they tend to park in the daylight period.
We will bring that up when we have direct conversations with the Manhattan Borough Commissioner. We do have that connection. We can talk directly to the agency and advance it that way. Sorry about that. It's public debating while we're in the whole thing, a mix of things, and we got in a kind of parliamentary trap there for a bit, so.
I got it. I just think my language is better than dangerous.
We'll move the agenda to what was number 5, continued discussion of parking for the NYPD 13th precinct. We have a pre-written resolution. We have pictures from a walkthrough that we did about a week ago. Yeah, Wednesday. I'm gonna give a quick summary of the walkthrough because we're at 8:45.
Here are some pictures, by the way.
It was in a little better condition than what we were expecting. We were really expecting big piles of trash underneath the cars. Many of the cars did not have an accumulation of trash. We did only see a few instances where there had been some. We didn't know why there was some, particularly on 20th Street in a part where there was no NYPD parking, that there was like a huge bag of trash under a car, and we didn't even take a picture of it because they're like, this is not the precinct problem. This is just New York. But that pile of wood in the tree planting box, that's essentially a miss to sea of NYPD vehicles. That's an example of something where we definitely want NYPD, if they're using the angled parking, if they're parking their equipment there, if there are cars parked on that block that have placards in them for some reason that you know, the placards are accepted and we don't know why those cars are there, but we know why those cars are there. In those cases, that area, there should be some attention to keep those swept, and we can ask the 13th precinct to put staff on that. We also saw that there was a building on the block that had planters in front of their building, ostensibly to enforce to some extent the lack of intrusions, because the picture that's next to that, it shows a car that's pulled up right to the front door of a building. It just seemed that that was a careless parking job. But a planter positioned on the street could maintain an accessible right of way while preventing that kind of incursion. And could be just an honest mistake. It's not an antagonistic thing or an absolute need for police services. So, you know, something like a guideline, like a planter or a fence, could help this kind of stuff. And I think a planter is the way to go because DOT is not going to install fencing. I think that our encouragement here is that, like, where is the resolution that we had?
I don't think I was sent a draft resolution.
You're referring to the resolution on creating additional parking?
Yes, because it was his resolution from last month.
Oh, okay.
So we just essentially just kind of put it on the back burner so that we could do the walkthrough. And since the precinct never got back to us about scheduling the walkthrough, we did the walkthrough ourselves. And I think our conclusion is that the conditions are consistent with our desire to implement that parking recommendation. And the conditions, we'll look at the resolution, we'll see if we need to add a resolve clause for attention for sweeping under the cars. And the reason why is because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't like such a severe sanitation problem, that it was going to be like a specialized equipment thing, or it was going to be a major burden for the precinct. It really does seem like something can be done with, you know, a broom every once in a while. And we don't know what kind of custodial staff that they have there, but we can recommend that, especially because it's a gigantic complex with several different departments there. So we could talk to them about that, and we can say, listen, we're not trying to harass anybody individually who does not do that. If you have anybody who does custodial stuff, let's see if we can add to that and see what it'll take to make that happen. And we could talk to the council members about that too.
Yeah, I think I was able to dig up Jason's resolutions. I can put that on screen.
Yeah, let's put that on the screen.
Are we conflating two issues? Because I thought we were talking about parking on the bus lanes. That's the street sweeping stuff that also is an issue that they're kind of doing.
They're sort of separate, sort of related. Yeah.
It's a situational thing.
The resolution doesn't address this, so we would have to add.
We can add something
to address that block. I sort of purposely avoided that block's situation in the initial version of the resolution.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but this is the.
Yes, this is the original resolution.
We had significant debate on this last month. Therefore, be it resolved that Manhattan Community Board 6 requests New York City Department of Transportation designate parking for NYPD vehicles only in the following areas in order to alleviate traffic congestion, improve pedestrian cyclist safety.
So there's a larger list that was in the presentation. Sorry, Brendan. I left it out of this originally. We can pull that in if we want to go back to to that presentation.
Let's do that as a last step because we knew that we had a discussion about that, and we can bring that in at the end before we have the actual vote.
Yep.
Let's just get to the other parts and figure out what we want to add to this resolve to incorporate our walkthrough findings.
Yep. So there probably needs to be a whereas that vehicles on what street was that? Sorry, the 21st Street? Yeah. Are not moved regularly and create a trash.
Yeah, if I need to add a contextual whereas, we can do that before it goes to the full board. Again, I'll do it overnight, early tomorrow, so that it's available for the office.
And then, yeah, I guess we just need to resolve to request regular cleaning of the street on 21st Street.
Yeah, let's make sure that that language is fleshed out before we have a vote.
I would say you also should, sorry about that, permission, put a yellow line, because if you look at that picture, that's actually my apartment building, one of them. You need, the car should, if it's going to park on the curb, it at least needs to have enough width for a wheelchair.
We will add a whereas to advise DOT to add ground markings to provide guidance for minimum ADA width. That should be a resolved for that one.
I support the sentiment. I'm concerned with supporting inclusion of intrusion into the pedestrian space as like a policy matter on the sidewalk. So I understand the concern, but I don't like the idea of like us saying that it's okay for the NYPD to use the sidewalk as a parking spot.
Yeah, but they do.
Yes.
Wheelchair people need to be able to get to the police station. And the police station even has a little ramp for wheelchairs to get in. But a wheelchair person can't get in.
I would prefer more like asking for the installation of planters to prevent parking on the sidewalk so that a proper ADA length is preserved rather than like demarking that like this is a designated parking spot, which it isn't and shouldn't be.
Well, there's one way to resolve that, to vote. Let's do a quick straw poll like vote. B, Hyder, we're gonna have a thing, you're gonna raise your hand with one of the two options. We're either going to add a resolve that asks for a ground marking to designate an ADA path, or we're going to ask for a resolve that asks DOT for a physical obstruction such as planters or fencing to along the curb to keep the sidewalk clear. If you support the ground marking resolve, please raise your hand now.
So are you seeing my hand up, or you want me to use the computer?
Yeah, anyone else at committee want the ground marking solution? Anyone who's lower your hands, who supports the planters or fencing or physical obstruction? We have 6 people who support the planters. We have 3 people who support the ground markings. We're going to move forward with the planters and the resolves.
Just one comment on that. Should we request potentially NYPD to install the planters? Because I suspect perhaps they would be more able to do that quicker. I don't know.
They're gonna install sugar cubes.
The planters that are there are installed by the building with doormats. So I imagine the cost is paid by the building.
Yes, and the maintenance, I assume.
Yeah, so my landlord is not gonna pay for one.
Right.
So is the community board gonna pay for it?
I mean, I wish we would, but I don't think we have budget for that.
So-
Oh, well,
Yeah.
we could put
We
it
should
in
have
the
it as
district
just a
needs statement
document.
next month. Yeah, I think we should,
Yeah,
I think we
that's
should pass this as is and then look at doing this district needs statement.
right.
So so language about planters, like what's reflected on screen, or,
I'm gonna write some text right now and I'm gonna put it in the chat.
okay.
The district needs statement, I would love to see that as broader.
So Brian, can I ask the question? I don't know if I'm still on.
Yes, you are.
I am not aware that the city would install planters other than for security purposes. Usually it's the landlord that has the property that installs it when they've come to the community board. So is this something beyond which transportation would do?
We're kind of freelancing on this one. Like, I know that
We
there's
really are freelancing.
where there's standard stuff that they do, but we're gonna ask for it now. And then if I hear something that is a much clearer thing that we should do, an intervention that suggests to us, then we can come back and revisit the matter at committee and pass this a new resolution. This gets this kind of out the door tonight is a general ask. And I don't think it's super impossible. I mean, we're asking for planters and whatnot, so you know,
So the
maybe.
only thing is, it becomes a precedent. And I wish Colleen was on.
I wish so too. Larry?
I have a proposed solution to the problem. Put this in the passive tense and take out the reference to the New York City Department of Transportation. Be it further resolved that planters be installed in order to prevent parking on the sidewalk.
Isn't it incumbent on us to ask specific agencies to do specific things?
Well, I'm trying to avoid getting into the morass of if it's gonna be a city agency or if it's going to be a private landlord. It's just a concept. At
Brendan,
this,
it's in the chat now. You were saying, Larry?
I'm just proposing this as an amendment to finesse our way through this uncharted area.
I think that we're sort of getting in the weeds on it, especially because like the original resolution is about adding parking to the area to clear the bus lanes and add daylighting and whatnot, and this is.
Well, this is an additional point to keep the sidewalk clear.
Yeah, I think let's make this suggestion and let's make it in good faith. And let's see if the city responds to it in good faith while maybe tweaking it in the long run. Because we just don't, this is, I think, an unknown. And I think this has been on our agenda for 2 months, so I think it's helpful to pass this now and not wait for us to get an answer on this.
Yeah, so from what I understand, this resolution is giving a lot of parking over to NYPD, thinking that, okay, NYPD won't do any more illegal parking and now is just gonna do legal parking because we're gonna give them all this legal parking. But last month, the precinct officer said 75% of the precinct takes public transit. So I predict that we give them all this public parking, the people that are taking public transit be like, oh, okay, you guys want us to drive in, fine. They take all the free parking, you keep all the illegal parking, and it's the exact opposite of what we want to happen. So I would suggest that we incentivize NYPD to take public transit. Since 75% are already doing it, hey, maybe we could pay you, you know what I mean, to take public transit.
So they all have policies as to when they pay for transit and stuff. You're really getting into city policy.
So my take on this is that based on the feedback we had last month, because the building complex actually has multiple agencies, and because we've seen a lot of equipment from other agencies on the blocks, we actually don't think that the majority of that parking is personal vehicles or precinct vehicles. We think it's a wide range of uses, and that we're actually clearing some space for some stuff that's parked in inappropriate spots along Second Avenue to be parked on the side streets with more designated parking. I think that's where we're going with this, and I don't think that this really opens the floodgates for people to change their commuting modes. But it, you know, one of the things is that placard parking is legal parking. It's an abuse of the placard system, but if a car is parked with a placard, unless there's an investigation that happens, that we have to assume that, you know, that they are reporting to an emergency. As absurd as it sounds, it's also like, that's the trust that we put in. I think all the reforms on this have been, stop giving out so many placards, actually enforce the placards, actually review the parking and the placards through a separate way rather than requiring community calls to 311. Larry.
Since the thrust of this is to clear Second Avenue, are we strong enough in emphasizing that up front, that's the reason why we have this resolution?
What about Third Avenue?
Second Avenue.
Second Avenue.
The thrust of why are we doing this is to make sure that Second Avenue is clear. The bus stop is clear, the bus lane is clear, bike lane is clear. Is that,
we could add a whereas for that.
I'm just saying, it should be right up at the top.
I believe I've done that,
We can-
Yeah, because I don't remember.
yeah,
Let's scroll look for it. Traffic congestion caused by NYPD vehicles parked in bus lanes has direct impact on the efficiency and reliability of public transportation, discouraging the use of public transit. Also, the park away such create hazards to pedestrians, cyclists. I think we get to rationale on this sufficiently in the whereases, unless we have a very specific point that has been left out.
I guess the point was that there is a problem, especially on Second Avenue. In other words,
Yes.
Instead of mentioning initially that community has complained about the illegal use of the bus lane and bus stop and sometimes the bike path for parking on Second Avenue.
I do
In the
think that
vicinity of the
there's,
precinct.
there's a lot of clarity in this, and I think that that's one of the reasons we make sure there's clarity in these things, because without a full board, people who are not on the transportation committee have to see the rationale for passing this.
I don't know if anybody would be up for a friendly amendment, very, very friendly.
Jar.
Can DOT study moving to an offset bus lane, because a curbside bus lane, to protect that is a Sisyphean task. It's never gonna happen. There's always gonna be somebody legal parking. Oh, I'm just dropping this off for 10 minutes. It's never gonna work. So can the DOT just study it?
So I support that very much, but the precinct officer, said that there's already only 3 lanes of traffic and there's school bus pickup, and there's just like not enough space on the avenue to support an additional lane taken up.
But the amendment was for DOT to study it, not for NYPD to study it.
Yeah,
For
the thing
DOT
is
to study.
DOT studied it, and the
was
outcomes are gonna be a lot worse, especially there's a school on the corner, there's 2 schools on the side street. That was what the precinct had told us.
Congestion pricing, right? I mean, it's
No,
directly
this
related to
is-
congestion pricing that the traffic should go down.
These are gonna be non-reschedulable, non-eliminatable car pickups for kids in those schools.
But it reduces the other.
It's gonna be, yeah.
They could study hours though for the bus lane, right? The bus lane could get hours that outside of this school, like during rush hour or whatnot.
I think, doesn't it have that marking already?
There is something.
I think it's 7 to 10, and I think it's 4 to 7. For the hours.
2 to 7.
2 to 7, okay. And then on top of that, it's not effective on weekends, so, my
It's a
impression,
very lame bus lane.
we can look at this. I'm very open to like getting, doing a little bit of research on digging into why we ended up on this design here and requesting, sort of a corridor refresh. Not as a way to hold this up and start another debate on it, but as a longer range thing. And I think this is the way a lot of our discussions will go, is that we will address a spot issue. We will suddenly start seeing rationale for a corridor refresh. It is our challenge to move nimbly on the spot issues and put a pin in the longer issues and actually make movement on them and see those commitments served. Is one of the most difficult things about our meetings, is just how we can get in the weeds of we start looking at if there's a crack in the curb and, it's unsafe for crossing it, and the next thing you know, we're rebuilding a bridge and, new Grand Central and,
So Brian, you're not changing this.
I think what we have now, I think where we're at, does anyone have a specific, modification that they want to make to this resolution as stated?
We have to narrow down what's
Yes,
left with it.
so Brendan, we need to bring in the list from the presentation now. Now is a good time to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you
just
for the
give
reminder.
me a moment.
We just need a moment for that. It is 9:04. I'm gonna try to get you guys out of here quickly, and I am going to look at participants. We do not have a rep from DOT here, so.
But also say in that last resolve, instead of fencing, I would put bike parking, because that's something DOT can't afford, they have budget for that.
Yeah,
Although-
and put bike parking.
Would we want that there, in that if we're concerned about space and handicapped accessibility, adding additional bikes on the sidewalk could make that.
I wish we had like a dry erase for this, but the idea is, here's the curve, here's the interstitial zone that's not, usable space for
Yeah.
walking through anyway. And then there's the 5-foot ADA clearance. What you don't want is the car going over the interstitial zone into the ADA clearance. And so having something in the zone
Okay.
helps with that. Without blocking ADA.
Okay, let me.
It is tricky though. You guys are on top of really good details here.
Yeah, can we add a whereas it says it's the busiest bus lane in America? It's very straightforward. No follow-up necessary.
It would be, yeah, whereas,
It's not there, but it can be added as part of it.
So this is the list.
Okay.
all right, we'll add something. He's gonna bring the list over. We're just gonna copy that.
Do you want to leave this up and discuss if we're, so the map here, are we good with?
We
This
discussed,
list?
we debated it last month. I think we're good.
Did?
Does anyone have
I
a
like
very
it, but-
specific modification? We don't wanna go back to the drawing board on this. Did anyone want to make an addition or exclusion? to
My
this?
only concern is street sweeping on NYPD's block streets, because that's the problem with 21st.
And we're gonna address that by asking for custodial attention to the block.
They don't even take care of their own trash.
Yeah, this is what they're gonna have to do.
I mean, I send them pictures every week about the leaky trash bags they have.
It's true. It is
Well,
quite disgusting.
Well, the bags are gonna be a matter of history soon enough.
Yes, well, we'll see about getting sanitation to do and pick up there,
Or I thought you were gonna say enforcement.
but we don't need to put that in the resolution right now.
They
We'll
will
just-
be
it's
using
on-
closed containers.
Yes.
So let's do this migration, and this sounds like it's gonna be like kind of what we can cobble together from all the various parts. I mean, I admit the custodial attention stuff is not the absolute strongest language we could use, but it is actually kind of the right way we should go in. They are gonna have custodial staff there that are not uniformed officers, and that's where I think that's the right attention that needs to be paid to the block. And you are correct, they are not doing it, but now we know what to ask for. We can nudge them very specifically.
Yeah, but last time Orlando said we can allow street sweeping even without a resolution, and that has not happened in the past month.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was optimistic.
Yes.
Yeah. If street sweepers get to it, that's great. I think the custodial attention needs to be the active plan B.
You might want to take that first line on, Brendan. Yeah, it was just sort of a placeholder.
The east side of Second
Yeah.
Avenue. All right, yeah.
It's covered in the lower.
Can I make,
This language,
so in this resolve, there is potentially an issue at full board. That this request is a micromanagement. So how do we feel about changing requests to recommends? And I know it's soft, but at least it gets it all on the record while dealing with the micromanagement pushback that we might get.
I might request that we request 50 spaces and suggest these 50 spaces.
Okay,
Did that make sense?
yes, it makes sense.
Mhm.
So we will change that we'll change that resolve to request New York to designate parking for 50 NYPD vehicles and recommends the following spaces.
These are their own private vehicles or
These are
official like police cars?
We assume that this is a lot of official stuff. As a matter of fact, with our discussion, because of the 75% trend, they're commuting in with transit. We think it's not even actually the 13th precinct, it's the co-agencies. And if we're fighting with personal vehicles of top brass in the department, they are gonna win that battle every single time. They're moving around on their own. And they are gonna always justify that they gotta park somewhere to go to their office somewhere. Larry,
May I have clarifying language instead of recommends the following spaces, recommends the following areas?
that's fine. Following areas for those spaces.
Yes.
B, how you feeling?
I want to call the question.
Anyone
Second.
Okay, we have a second.
okay, when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. B Disman,
In favor?
Brock Friedman,
Favor.
Jason Cromowitz.
In favor.
Matt Roberts,
Abstain.
okay, Larry Shire,
In favor?
Gabe Terzo,
In favor.
Brian Van Nieuwenhoven,
In favor.
Jerry Weinstein,
In favor.
And Hyder Zaidi.
In favor.
With 8 in favor, nobody opposed, and 1 abstention, the resolution passes.
This is gonna be a doozy at full board.
There's gonna be a lot of doozies at full board this month.
It's gonna be a very long full board.
Yes, I appreciate feedback from members of the public, and we are going to be on this as many ways as we can, even with resolutions that may be imperfect or whatnot. We're on it one way or another. Thank you for all the information we got. I think we have some leads in which to get better leverage on this. We're going to move the agenda to the report from the New York City Department of Transportation. I don't think we have anyone from the Department of Transportation here, so I'm going to move the agenda to the chair's report. It's going to be kind of long, but I'll try to make it as quick as possible. I waive my report. Next, old and new business. Do I see anyone with old or new business? B, Hader. Do I see a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I think we can just get by with the one motion.